Martha Whitlock came to a stranger's ranch with frozen hands, an empty stomach, and a question that could ruin her name forever. She had no father left to protect her, no brother to ride beside her, and no warm room waiting in town. The snow had already taken her last mule, the bank had taken her little house, and the people of Cedar Ridge had taken the last bit of mercy from their faces. So she rode into the white wind toward a lonely cowboy named Caleb Warren and prepared to ask him for the only thing she had left to trade: her name. What she did not know was that Caleb had been waiting for that knock for 9 long years. Her horse stumbled near the rise above Broken Pine Ranch. Martha felt the animal's knees weaken beneath her and pulled back on the reins before it could fall. The mare's breath came out in hard white clouds, and her ribs showed under the worn saddle blanket. Martha slid down into the snow and led her the last stretch by hand. Her boots sank deep. Her thin gloves were stiff with ice. The old road was almost gone beneath the storm, but she kept walking because there was nothing behind her except shame and nothing ahead except one small chance. Broken Pine did not look rich from the road. It looked quiet, hard, and steady. A long fence ran along the frozen pasture. The barn leaned a little to one side, but its roof was strong. The house stood behind a line of bare cottonwoods with smoke rising from the chimney and one yellow lamp burning in the front window. That lamp made Martha stop for a moment. It looked too warm, too safe. Too much like something that did not belong to her. She had seen Caleb Warren only a few times in her life. He came into Cedar Ridge for supplies, paid in cash, spoke little, and left before people had time to make conversation. He was not known as friendly, but he was known as fair. Her father had once said Caleb was the sort of man who would rather do a kind thing in silence than speak a kind word in public. Martha had remembered that because, at the time, she had thought it sounded lonely. Now loneliness was the very thing she was riding toward. She tied the mare near the porch and stood at the door with her satchel pressed under one arm. Inside that satchel were 2 dresses, a cracked comb, a small Bible that had belonged to her mother, and 47 cents wrapped in cloth. That was all. Every year of her life had been reduced to something she could carry against her ribs. She knocked 3 times. The door opened before she could decide whether to run. Caleb Warren stood in the doorway with his sleeves rolled up and a gray shirt open at the throat. He was taller than she remembered, broad in the shoulders with dark hair touched by silver near his ears. His face was rough from weather and work, but his eyes were not rough. They were calm, brown, and deep, the kind of eyes that seemed to notice too much and say too little. "Martha Whitlock," he said. Her breath caught. He did not ask her name. He did not look surprised. He said it like he had known she would come. "You remember me?" she asked. "I remember you." Those 3 words struck her harder than the cold. In Cedar Ridge, people had looked through her for years. They remembered her father's debts. They remembered the auction notice on her door. They remembered that she had left church early the day Mrs. Bell laughed behind her hand. But they did not remember her, not truly. Caleb stepped back. "Come inside before the storm takes what is left of you." Martha entered because pride was useless when a person was freezing. The front room was simple. A stone fireplace warmed the air. A wooden table sat near the window with 2 chairs. There were tools hanging on one wall, a stack of folded blankets by the hearth, and a shelf holding coffee tins, ledgers, and a few worn books. Nothing was fancy. Nothing was wasted. The room felt like the man himself, plain, quiet, and built to last. Caleb took her satchel from her hand without asking and set it near the door. Then he moved to the fire and added another log. Martha stood close enough to feel heat touch her skirt and tried not to shake. Her hands hurt as they warmed. That pain was sharp and honest, and she welcomed it because it meant she was still alive. "Coffee?" Caleb asked. "Yes," she said. He went into the kitchen and came back with a tin cup. She held it between both hands and stared into the dark liquid like it could tell her what kind of woman she had become. Caleb sat across from her, not too close, not too far. He did not press her with questions. That almost made it worse. She had prepared herself for doubt, pity, maybe even disgust. She had prepared herself to beg without sounding like she was begging. She had not prepared herself for silence that gave her room to speak. So she spoke. "I lost the house last week," she said. "The bank took it after Mr. Whitlock's debt was sold again. I tried to stay with Mrs. Avery, but her son came home from Denver and said there was no room. I slept one night in the wash shed behind the church. Last night I slept in the old wagon house. she swallowed. I cannot do that again. Caleb's face did not change, but his hand closed slowly around his coffee cup. I can work, Martha said quickly. I can cook, I can mend, I can keep accounts. I know chickens, horses, milk cows, and garden planting. I can make soap. I can cut cloth without waste. I am not asking for charity. I did not think you were. His voice was quiet, and that made her courage tremble. She looked down at her cup. People will talk if I live here as a hired woman. They will. And they will talk worse if I leave here after asking. They might. She forced herself to look at him. Then I have a proposal, a practical one, not one born from romance, not one with soft words. Her throat tightened, but she made the words come. Marry me. Give me your name and a roof through winter. In return, I will work this ranch like it is my own. I will not be a burden to you. I will not ask for affection. I will not pretend this is anything more than survival. The fire popped. Snow tapped against the window. Martha heard her own heartbeat like a fist against a door. Caleb did not lean back. He did not laugh. He did not look away. Yes, he said. Martha blinked. You did not hear me right. I heard you. You should think on it. I have. You could regret it. I do not think I will. A strange fear rose inside her then, not fear of danger, but fear of something she could not understand. Mr. Warren, I am offering you a bargain. I have nothing else. His eyes softened, though his voice stayed plain. I know what you are offering. And you accept? Yes. She stared at him, searching for greed, pity, loneliness, anything that might explain the speed of his answer. She found none of those things. She found only a steadiness that made her feel even more unsteady. Caleb stood. The room upstairs at the end of the hall is yours. Supper is on the stove. I will see to your horse. My mare needs grain if you can spare it. I can. She is tired. I saw. He took his coat from the peg and opened the door. Cold wind rushed in, but he paused before stepping out. Martha, he said. She looked up. You are safe in this house. Then he went out into the snow. Martha stood alone in the warm room with her coffee cooling in her hands. Safe. The word sounded too large for the space around it. She had been careful for so long that safety felt almost like a trick. Still, she climbed the stairs because her legs were weak and the room was waiting. At the end of the narrow hall, she opened the door and stopped. The room was small, but it had been prepared with care. A clean quilt lay across the bed. A lamp sat on the table beside it. There was a wash basin, a folded towel, and a little vase with dried lavender tied in twine. Near the window stood a sewing basket. Martha moved toward it slowly, as if it might vanish if she reached too fast. Inside were needles, thread, a thimble, small scissors, and 2 fresh spools of dark blue thread. Not old things forgotten in a drawer. New things, chosen things. She turned to the wardrobe and opened it. It was mostly empty, but on the shelf lay a folded piece of warm brown wool, good enough for a winter skirt, and beside it a packet of pins. Martha touched the cloth with 2 fingers and felt her chest tighten. A man did not keep such things by accident. She went to the window. Outside, Caleb led her mare into the barn, one hand gentle on the reins. He spoke to the animal, though she could not hear the words through the glass. The mare lowered her head and followed him without fear. Martha stepped back from the window. The room had not been made ready in a hurry. The quilt smelled clean, not musty. The lamp had oil. The sewing basket had been placed where the morning light would fall. Someone had thought about this room. Someone had imagined a woman needing it. She sat on the bed and pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking. For the first time since the bank notice had been nailed to her door, Martha wanted to cry. She did not. Tears were too costly when a person still had decisions to make. But her eyes burned and the room blurred for a moment. 6 days later, Martha Whitlock became Martha Warren. They were married in the small church at Cedar Ridge by Reverend Amos Fletcher, with snow stacked against the windows and 3 witnesses sitting stiffly in the front pew. Caleb brought his foreman, Jonah Pierce, a quiet man with a scar on his chin and a respectful nod. The second witness was a young ranch hand named Eli Brooks, who looked nervous enough to be the one getting married. The third was Mrs. Nora Bell, who came only because the Reverend's wife had sent her, and because town women rarely missed a chance to see a thing they could later discuss. The ceremony was short. Martha said the words clearly. Caleb said his in the same steady voice he used for everything. When Reverend Fletcher pronounced them husband and wife, Martha felt no great change in the air. No music, no warm rush, just the sound of wind outside and the weight of a new name settling over her shoulders. Outside the church, Mrs. Bell looked at Martha with a smile thin as paper. "Well," she said, "God does provide in unexpected ways." Martha met her eyes. "Yes, he does." Caleb helped Martha into the wagon without saying a word about the insult. That was good. If he had tried to defend her, she might have felt smaller. Instead, he handed her the reins while he checked the harness, as though she belonged beside him and needed no explanation. Life at Broken Pine began with work. Martha woke before dawn the next morning and made biscuits, eggs, and coffee. Caleb came in from the barn with snow on his boots and stopped when he saw the table set. For a moment, something moved across his face too quickly for her to name. "You did not have to start so early," he said. "Yes, I did." He nodded once and sat. They ate in quiet, but it was not an empty quiet. It was the quiet of two people listening for the shape of each other. Martha noticed that Caleb did not take the last biscuit until she had taken one first. She noticed that he refilled her coffee without asking. She noticed that he never stood too close behind her, never reached over her shoulder, never moved in a way that made the room feel smaller. By the second week, she had taken over the household accounts. By the third, she had found 2 errors in the cattle ledger and 1 payment missing from a buyer in Laramie. Caleb watched her spread papers across the table and build order out of confusion. "You found all that?" he asked. "I looked. I have been looking at those books for months." "You were looking tired." That almost made him smile. "Almost." By the 4th week, the ranch hand spoke to her like she had always been there. Jonah brought her receipts without being asked. Eli carried water to the kitchen because he said she looked like she was planning to do it herself, and Caleb would skin him alive if he let that happen. Martha told him Caleb did not seem like a man who skinned anyone alive. Eli said she had not seen him angry yet. But Martha had seen enough of Caleb to know that his anger would not be loud. It would be quiet, and that made her careful. The town was not careful. The first time she returned to Cedar Ridge as Mrs. Warren, the general store went silent for half a breath too long. Martha felt every eye slide toward her and away again. She walked to the counter and asked for flour, lamp oil, and black thread. Mrs. Bell stood near the canned peaches with 2 other women. "I suppose ranch life suits some women quickly," Mrs. Bell said. Martha kept her eyes on the storekeeper. "Black thread, please." "Some folks are lucky to find comfort before the snow gets deep," another woman murmured. Martha paid for her goods, folded the receipt, and turned. Comfort is not luck when it is earned. No one answered. When she stepped outside, Caleb was standing by the wagon with a sack of feed over one shoulder. He looked at her face, then at the store behind her. "Trouble?" he asked. "Nothing I cannot carry." He set the feed in the wagon. "You should not have to carry everything." Martha looked at him then, truly looked at him, and for one small, dangerous moment she wanted to believe he meant more than the words. But wanting was risky. Wanting could make a woman foolish, so she climbed into the wagon and said nothing. The first real clue came from Jonah. It happened in the barn on a cold morning when Martha was mending a tear in a saddle blanket. Jonah came in looking for a broken bridle strap and found her sitting on a crate near the light. "That room upstairs working out for you?" he asked. Martha kept stitching. "It is fine. Caleb fixed it up last spring, said it needed doing." Her needle stopped. "Last spring?" she asked. Jonah frowned like he realized too late that he had stepped where he should not. "Maybe summer, I do not recall." "You do recall." He rubbed the back of his neck. He had Eli scrub the floor twice. Ordered that sewing basket from Cheyenne, bought wool too, I think. We figured he had kin coming. Martha looked down at the dark thread in her hand. "No kin came," Jonah said softly. Then he found the strap and left the barn quicker than he had entered it. Martha sat very still while the horses shifted in their stalls and the wind pushed snow against the barn wall. Last spring, she had still been living in her little house near Cedar Ridge. Last spring, the bank had not yet taken it. Last spring, she had no reason to come to Broken Pine Ranch. No reason to believe Caleb Warren would ever be more than a quiet cowboy who passed through town with his hat low and his words few. Yet he had prepared a room. A sewing basket from Cheyenne, wool in her size, a lamp by the bed. That night she lay awake under the quilt and listened to the house breathe. Caleb moved below stairs, banking the fire, checking the latch, setting the kettle for morning. She knew his steps now. She knew the sound of his chair shifting and the soft scrape of his boots by the door. Then she saw a faint glow under her door. She rose, opened it quietly, and found the hallway lamp burning low, not bright enough to wake her, just bright enough so if she needed to step out in the night, she would not do it in darkness. Martha stared at that lamp for a long time. In the morning, she said nothing. Caleb said nothing, but something had changed. A question had entered the house, and it walked beside her from room to room. Why had Caleb Warren been ready for her long before she came? And what else had he kept hidden in the quiet places of Broken Pine Ranch? The next morning, Martha found peppermint tea in the kitchen cupboard. She stood with the cupboard door open and stared at the small paper bundle tied neatly with string. She had not bought it. She had not asked for it. She had not even spoken of it since coming to Broken Pine Ranch. But peppermint tea had been her habit for years, back when her father was alive and the little house in Cedar Ridge still belonged to them. On cold nights, she used to drink it before bed because her mother had told her it settled the heart. Martha touched the bundle with one finger, then pulled her hand back like it might burn her. Caleb came in from outside carrying a pail of milk. He stopped when he saw her at the cupboard. "Something wrong?" he asked. She turned slowly. "Where did this come from?" His eyes moved to the tea. For 1 second, he looked like a man who had stepped on a loose board and heard it crack under him. "Mrs. Avery sells it sometimes," he said. "I know who sells it." He set the pail down. "I did not ask for it," Martha said. "No. I did not tell you I drink it." "No." The kitchen felt smaller than it had a moment before. The stove was warm, the window was gray with morning frost, and Caleb stood near the table with his hat in his hands, quiet as ever. But there was something in that quiet now. Not emptiness, not peace, something held back. "How did you know?" Martha asked. Caleb looked at the floor, then back at her. "You bought it in town, usually on Fridays, when Mrs. Avery had any." Martha's throat tightened. "You watch me buy tea." "I noticed." "For how long?" He did not answer fast enough. "For how long, Caleb?" His jaw moved once, "A long while." That answer was worse than no answer. Martha closed the cupboard door gently, though she wanted to slam it. She did not know whether to be angry, afraid, or touched, and because she could not choose one feeling, she chose work instead. "I have bread to start," she said. Caleb nodded once and stepped back toward the door. "I will be in the barn." When he left, Martha stood alone in the kitchen with the peppermint tea hidden behind the cupboard door and her whole mind full of questions. Caleb had not lied. That was the trouble. A lie would have given her something clear to hold. But he had told the truth in pieces, and pieces were harder. Pieces made a person wonder what shape the whole thing would make when it was finally put together. The days after that were careful days. Martha kept working. She cleaned the pantry, counted flour, salted pork, beans, candles, lamp oil, and coffee. She repaired 3 shirts for Jonah and 2 pairs of gloves for Eli. She studied the ranch accounts and found that a cattle buyer from Fort Laramie had underpaid Caleb by $12 the previous fall. Caleb did not seem surprised that she found it. He seemed only tired that he had missed it. "You should have told him," she said while writing the letter. "I meant to." "You mean to do many things, and then go fix a fence instead." That time he did smile. It was small, brief, and gone almost at once, but Martha saw it. She looked down at the paper quickly before he could see that she had seen it. The ranch had begun to feel less like a place she was using and more like a place that was using her properly. There was always something to do, and Martha liked that. Work gave shape to worry. Work made fear stand in line and wait its turn, but some worries would not wait. The old smokehouse behind the second barn troubled her. She had noticed it during her first week, but had not thought much of it. The building was low and square, with dark boards and a heavy door. It sat apart from the rest of the ranch, near the cottonwoods where the snow drifted deep. At first, she assumed it held tools or cured meat, but then she saw the lock. It was not a simple latch. It was an iron padlock, old but strong, polished near the keyhole from use. Someone opened it often enough to keep it from rusting. Martha did not ask about it, not yet. She only watched. Caleb went there twice in 1 week. Both times he went near sunset, after the work was done and before supper. Both times he stayed only a few minutes. Both times he came back quieter than before. Martha noticed because she was good at noticing. She had become good at it the way some people become good with a knife or a needle. Life had taught her that small signs often told the truth before people did. Then Cedar Ridge gave her another sign. She rode into town with Eli one cold afternoon to collect mail and buy lamp oil. Caleb had stayed behind with Jonah to move cattle away from a broken fence line near the creek. Martha was glad of the trip. She needed thread, salt, and a little distance from Caleb's silence. The general store was busy when she entered. Mrs. Bell stood near the counter with 2 women from church. They went quiet the moment Martha walked in. Martha asked for oil and brown thread. She kept her back straight, her voice calm, her face steady. She had learned that some people enjoyed seeing hurt. She did not give them the pleasure. Mrs. Bell spoke anyway. "I hear Broken Pine is doing well since Mrs. Warren took charge of the books." One woman gave a soft laugh. Martha did not turn. A ranch does better when the numbers are right. Mrs. Bell stepped closer. Some women have a gift for finding their way into comfort. Martha paid the storekeeper and took her parcel. Some women mistake cruelty for wisdom because it is the only thing they have practiced. The store fell silent. Mrs. Bell's face flushed. Martha walked out before anyone could answer. Outside, Eli was sitting in the wagon with the reins in his hands and his hat pulled low. He looked at Martha, then at the store door. "She said something ugly, did she?" "She said what she knows how to say." Eli looked down at the reins. He was young but not foolish. "Folks talked about you before you came to the ranch. They talked after too." "I know." He hesitated. Mr. Warren did not like it. Martha turned to him. "What do you mean?" Eli swallowed. "He used to hear things, in town, about your father's debt, about the bank, about you sewing late to pay interest. He never said much, but sometimes he came back from town looking like he wanted to break a fence post with his bare hands." Martha climbed into the wagon slowly. Why would he care? Eli looked sorry the moment the words left his mouth. "I do not know, ma'am." But Martha knew he knew something. Maybe not all of it, but enough to be afraid of saying more. On the ride back to Broken Pine, she watched the gray road pass under the wagon wheels and thought of Caleb in Cedar Ridge, hearing people talk about her trouble while she never knew he was listening. She thought of the tea, the prepared room, the lamp left low in the hall, the sewing basket from Cheyenne. The shape was growing clearer, but not clearer enough. That evening, a stranger rode to Broken Pine. He came near dusk, tall and thin, wearing a black coat too fine for ranch work and gloves too clean for the road. His name was Victor Harland. Martha knew it because Caleb said the name with a coldness she had never heard in him before. Victor owned land east of Cedar Ridge. He had bought 2 failed farms the year before and was known for wanting more. Men like him did not build things. They waited until other people were weak, then bought what fell from their hands. Victor stopped his horse near the porch and smiled like he had brought good news. "Warren," he said. "Harland," Caleb answered. Martha stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. Victor's eyes moved to her. "Mrs. Warren, I wondered if the stories were true." Caleb stepped down from the porch. "Say your business." Victor pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I am offering again on the north pasture, fair price, better than fair considering the hard winter." "It is not for sale." "It may need to be." Victor's smile stayed in place. "Bankmen are less patient in spring, repairs cost money, cattle die, hired help eats, a wife costs too." Caleb took one slow step forward. "Speak carefully." Martha had never seen him like that. His voice was quiet, but it changed the air. Even Victor's horse shifted under him. Victor lifted one hand. No insult meant, only business. "Then hear my business, right out." Victor's smile thinned. "You are making a mistake." "I have made plenty, this is not one." For a moment, no one moved. Then Victor folded the paper and tucked it away. He turned his horse, but before leaving, he looked at Martha again. Sometimes women learn too late what kind of man they married. Caleb's hands tightened at his sides, but Martha spoke first. And sometimes men speak too much when they have nothing worth hearing. Victor's face hardened, then he rode away down the lane. That night, Martha asked about the north pasture. Caleb sat at the kitchen table with his coffee untouched. The fire had burned low. Outside, wind moved softly along the eaves. "Harland wants the water line," he said. "There is a spring near the North Ridge, best water on this side of Cedar Ridge." "Can he take it?" "Not unless I sell." "Will he try another way?" Caleb looked at her, likely. "Then I need the land papers." He studied her for a long moment. "You think you can help?" "I know I can help." The next morning, Caleb brought down a wooden box full of old deeds, tax papers, survey maps, and water rights records. Martha spread them across the table and began reading. The work was slow, but she liked slow work when it mattered. She put documents in order by year. She marked every boundary line, every payment, every witness name. Caleb's father had been careful, but not all the papers were complete. One map had a corner torn off. One receipt named the North Spring, but did not list the ridge marker. Another paper referred to a survey filed in Cheyenne that was not in the box. That missing paper mattered. Martha felt it the way she felt a loose thread in cloth. Something important had been pulled out of place. "Do you have more records?" she asked Caleb on the third night. "That is all in the house." "In the barns?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Martha looked up from the table. "In the smokehouse." Caleb went still. There it was, not guilt exactly, not anger either, but a closing of the face, a door inside him shutting. "That building is private," he said. "This ranch is at risk." "I know. And if there are papers in there, I need them." "There are no land papers in there." "But there is something." He looked away. Martha stood. "Caleb, I asked you to marry me because I had nothing left, and you said yes before I could even finish. Since then I have found tea I never mentioned, a room prepared before I needed it, wool bought before I arrived, and men on this ranch who stop talking the moment they say too much." Her voice shook, and she hated that it did. "Now a locked building stands behind your barn, and every road in my mind leads to it." Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the pain in his face surprised her. "I will tell you," he said, "but not tonight." "Why not?" "Because once I tell you, I cannot untell it." "That is not an answer." "No," he said softly, "it is the only one I have." Martha stared at him, then gathered the papers and stacked them with careful hands. "Then I will work with what I have." She went upstairs and shut her door. For 2 days she did not speak of the smokehouse again. Caleb did not either. They moved around each other politely, carefully, painfully. It was worse than anger. Anger would have burned through and left something clean behind. This silence stayed damp and heavy. Then the storm came. It rolled in after supper, fast and hard, with wet snow and wind that bent the cottonwoods near the yard. Jonah and Eli were trapped in the bunkhouse. The animals were shut in. Caleb had gone out before dark to check a weak place in the barn roof and had not yet come back. Martha stood at the kitchen window, holding the lamp, watching white snow tear sideways across the yard. The smokehouse was barely visible through the storm, but the shape of it was there. Dark, locked, waiting. She told herself not to go. Then she put on her coat. The walk to the smokehouse felt longer than it was. Snow struck her face. The wind shoved at her shoulders. She reached the door with numb hands and found the padlock slick with ice. She did not have the key. She would not break it. But the old boards near the back wall had pulled away from the frame. She had seen that gap before. Martha went around the building, crouched in the snow, and pushed at the loose board. It gave more than she expected. She pushed again. The board groaned open wide enough for her to slip one arm through and lift the latch from inside. The door opened. Cold darkness breathed out. Martha stepped inside and lit the lamp. The smokehouse was not full of meat or tools. It was clean, swept, kept, Along one wall were covered shelves. In the center sat a cedar chest, dark red with age, strong and polished by careful hands. On the lid, burned deep into the wood, was one word. Martha. Her knees nearly failed. She moved closer, holding the lamp high. Her name had not been scratched there in a hurry. It was old work, careful work. The letters had darkened with time, as though they had been waiting through many seasons. The chest was not locked. Martha lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, more than she could count at first glance. They were tied in bundles by year, each bundle neat, each envelope sealed, none of them addressed. She took the top letter with shaking hands and opened it. The date at the top was 9 years old. The handwriting was Caleb's. I saw Martha Whitlock today outside Avery's store. She helped old Mr. Pike carry flour to his wagon, though he never thanked her. She smiled anyway, but not because she was foolish. She smiled because she had decided his manners would not change hers. I do not know why that stayed with me, but it did. Martha sat down slowly on the cold floor. She opened another. Her mother died this week. I saw her at church, sitting straight as a fence post, with grief all over her face and not one person brave enough to sit beside her. I wanted to, I did not. I have regretted it since. Another. She gave her last good blanket to the Miller child when the fever came through town. People called it kindness. That is too small a word. Kindness is easy when it costs little. What she did cost her something. Martha pressed the letter to her chest. The storm beat against the walls. The lamp shook in her hand. All those years she had thought no one saw her. All those years she had folded pain into work and carried shame like a sack of stones. All those years she had walked through Cedar Ridge with her head high while people watched her fall and called it gossip. But someone had seen. Not loudly, not close enough to claim her, not close enough to rescue her when she had not asked to be rescued. Caleb had seen from a distance, written it down, and kept it safe. She reached for another bundle and found one tied with blue thread. The date was last spring. I fixed the upstairs room today. I do not know if she will ever see it. I do not know if I have any right to hope she will. But something in me says winter is coming for her harder than before, and if the day comes when she needs a door, I want mine ready before she knocks. Martha covered her mouth. The smokehouse door opened behind her. She turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, snow on his hat, snow on his shoulders, and sorrow in his eyes. He looked at the open chest, then at the letter in her hand, and he did not ask what she had done. He already knew. Martha stood slowly, holding the old letter like it was alive. 9 years, she said. Caleb's face was pale in the lamplight. Yes. Her voice broke before she could stop it. You loved me for 9 years and never said a word. Caleb looked at her through the storm-dark room. Yes, he said, and now I need to tell you why. Caleb stood in the open doorway of the smokehouse while the storm pushed snow around his boots. Martha waited with the letter in her hand, and her heart beating so hard it almost hurt. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The cedar chest sat open between them, full of 9 years of words he had never sent and feelings he had never asked her to carry. Caleb stepped inside and closed the door against the wind. The room became quiet again, except for the storm pressing against the walls. I loved you before I had the right to love you, he said. That is why I kept silent. Martha stared at him. You could have spoken to me. I could have. Then why did you not? He took off his hat and held it in both hands. Because when I first noticed you, your mother had just died. Then your father got sick. Then the debts came. Every time I thought of speaking, you were already carrying something heavy. I did not want to become another weight. Martha looked down at the letters. Her fingers trembled over the old paper. Caleb continued, his voice low. I was not watching to own you. I was not waiting for you to fall. I was just afraid the world would keep taking from you until no one remembered who you were before it started taking. So I wrote it down. The good things, the brave things, the things no one else seemed to notice. Martha wanted to be angry because anger would have been easier, but the letters made anger hard. They were not full of hunger or claim. They were full of witness. He had seen her giving, working, grieving, standing, surviving. He had seen the small parts of her life that had seemed invisible even to herself. And the room, she asked. Caleb looked toward the chest. Last spring, I heard the bank had refused your last extension. I knew you would fight it. I knew you would try every decent road first. But I also knew winter would come. I fixed the room because if there came a day when you had no door left, I wanted mine ready. You never came to offer help. No. Why? Because help can feel like a chain when a person has not asked for it. He looked at her then. You deserve to choose, even if you never chose me. The words settled in the cold room between them. Martha sat back down on the wooden floor. She did not care that her skirt touched dust. She did not care that the storm was still raging. She was too full of the truth to stand under it. I came because I was desperate, she said. I know. I asked you to marry me because I needed to survive. I know that too. She lifted her eyes, and you said yes because you loved me. Yes. That is not a fair bargain. No, Caleb said softly. It was never a bargain to me, but I tried to live by the bargain you offered. I did not want you to feel trapped by what I felt. Martha closed the letter and placed it back in the chest. She ran her hand over the bundles tied by year. 9 years. 9 years of being seen by a man who had never once tried to push himself into her life. That kind of love frightened her because it was too patient to be dismissed and too quiet to be called foolish. Before she could answer, a hard knock sounded against the smokehouse door. Caleb turned fast and opened it. Jonah stood outside, bent against the wind, snow stuck to his beard. Harland is at the house, Jonah said. Brought 2 men with him, says he has papers. Caleb's face hardened. Martha stood at once, the land papers. Caleb looked at her. Not now, you are cold. I am not made of sugar, she picked up the lamp, and I know where the missing survey is. Caleb stared at her. Martha pointed to the chest. You kept my letters here because this place was safe. If your father had papers he wanted safe, he would use the same place. Caleb looked toward the covered shelves along the wall. He crossed the room and pulled back the canvas. Behind it sat old boxes, each marked in faded ink. Martha moved beside him with the lamp. There it was. North Spring Survey, 1879. Caleb lifted the box down and opened it. Inside were maps, signed statements, tax receipts, and a water claim with the county seal still clear enough to read. Martha took the papers and checked them quickly, her eyes moving over every line. This is it, she said. This proves the North Spring belongs to Broken Pine. Harlan's claim is worthless. Caleb watched her with something like wonder. You are sure? I am sure enough to stand in front of him. They hurried back through the storm together. This time Caleb held her arm, not like a man pulling her, but like a man making sure the wind did not steal her footing. Martha let him. That small choice warmed her more than the coat around her shoulders. Victor Harlan stood in the front room when they entered, dripping snow onto the floor as though he owned it. 2 hard-faced men stood near the door. Eli was by the stove, pale but steady, holding a fire poker like he meant to use it if he had to. Victor smiled when he saw Martha. There she is, the new Mrs. Warren. I hope your husband has explained that sentiment does not hold land. Martha stepped forward and placed the papers on the table. No, but records do. Victor's smile faded slightly. Martha opened the old survey and spread it flat. Your claim says the North Spring was never properly recorded under the Warren deed. This survey from 1879 proves otherwise. It was signed by the county clerk, witnessed by 2 landowners, and renewed in the tax record every year after. Victor looked at the paper but did not touch it. Martha laid down the water claim next. This gives Broken Pine full rights to the spring and the line running south from it. If you try to file against Caleb, these papers go to court. If you try to pressure him again, they go to the sheriff first. One of Victor's men shifted. Caleb took one slow step toward him, and the man went still. Victor's face turned cold. You think a few old papers scare me? No, Martha said. I think a public loss does. The room went silent. Martha kept her voice calm. You built your name on making weak people sell before they learned their rights, but Caleb is not weak. This ranch is not weak, and I am very good with records. Jonah made a small sound near the door that might have been a laugh. Victor folded his gloves slowly. This is not over. Caleb's voice came quiet and firm. "It is over tonight, leave my house." For one breath, Victor looked like he might refuse. Then he saw Caleb's face and thought better of it. He took his papers, turned to his men, and left without another word. The door closed behind him. Eli lowered the fire poker. Jonah let out a breath. Caleb looked at Martha, and the whole room seemed to hold still. "You saved the ranch," he said. Martha shook her head. "Your father saved it first. I only found where the truth was kept." Caleb looked toward the window where snow struck the glass in white bursts. "Still," he said, "you found it." After Jonah and Eli returned to the bunkhouse, the house became quiet again. Martha gathered the land papers and stacked them carefully. Caleb banked the fire. They moved around each other like they had for weeks, but now the silence was different. It was no longer full of hidden things. It was full of things waiting to be said. At last, Martha turned to him. "I read enough of the letters to know the truth." Caleb stood near the fireplace, his face half lit by the flames. "I did not know what love was supposed to feel like," she said. "For a long time, I thought it was something people used to ask too much from you. Then I came here, and you gave me a room without asking for my heart. You gave me your name without demanding my gratitude. You gave me space when most people would have taken advantage of my need." Caleb did not speak. Martha stepped closer. "I came here to survive, but somewhere in this house, survival turned into something else." His eyes stayed on hers. "What did it turn into?" he asked. Martha thought of the hallway lamp, the peppermint tea, the sewing basket, the mare warm in the barn, the way Caleb never touched what she did not offer, the way he had loved her for 9 years and still waited for her to choose. "It turned into home," she said. Caleb's face changed then. Not much. He was still Caleb. Quiet, steady, careful, but something in him broke open just enough for her to see the hope he had carried for so long. "I love you," he said. "I have for 9 years, but I will not ask you to answer just because I waited." Martha reached for his hand. His fingers closed around her slowly, as if even now he was giving her time to pull away. "I love you too," she said. "Not because you waited, because you stayed kind while you waited." For the first time, Caleb smiled fully. It was not bright or boyish. It was deeper than that. It was the smile of a man who had held winter in his chest for years and finally felt spring touch the ground. The storm passed before morning. By sunrise, the valley lay white and clean under a pale blue sky. Martha stood on the porch with Caleb beside her and watched light move across Broken Pine Ranch. The barn roof shone with snow. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse. In the distance, Jonah shouted at Eli for dropping a feed sack, and Eli shouted back that the sack had betrayed him first. Martha laughed. Caleb looked at her like the sound was something he wanted to remember. She knew that look now. It no longer made her afraid. In the weeks that followed, the cedar chest was brought into the front room and placed beneath the window. Caleb asked if she wanted the letters burned, locked away, or left in the smokehouse. Martha shook her head. "They belong in the house," she said. "They are not a secret anymore." Spring came slowly to Cedar Ridge. The snow melted from the fences. The north spring ran strong. Harlan did not return. Mrs. Bell still looked away when Martha entered the general store, but other people started bringing her sewing, asking her advice on accounts, and calling her Mrs. Warren with respect instead of gossip. Martha built a small workroom off the back of the house with shelves for thread and a table Caleb made by hand. It was not perfect. One leg was a little short, and Eli said that gave it character. Martha said character did not help a table stand straight. Caleb fixed it before supper. By summer, Broken Pine felt different, not richer, not easier, just fuller. Jonah stayed on. Eli grew into his boots. Martha's mare grew round and healthy. The porch had 2 chairs now instead of 1. One evening, as the sun dropped gold over the pasture, Martha sat beside Caleb on those porch chairs with a piece of mending in her lap. The air smelled of warm grass and wood smoke. The house behind them was quiet. The cedar chest rested beneath the front window, full of the years when love had waited silently for the right to speak. Martha looked across the land and thought of the woman who had ridden there in the snow with nothing but a satchel and a desperate proposal. That woman had believed survival was the best she could hope for. She had believed a roof was enough, food was enough, a name was enough. But she had been wrong. A person could survive without being seen. Martha had done it for years. but being seen, truly seen, could bring a soul back to life. Caleb reached over and took her hand. He did not ask if it was all right. He knew now, and she turned her palm into his because she knew too. The last light faded over Broken Pine Ranch, and Martha leaned her shoulder against his. The dark came gently. The house waited behind them, warm and real, and for the first time in many years, Martha did not feel like a woman who had escaped the cold. She felt like a woman who had chosen where she belonged.